Hello everyone, in this video let us start using test management for Jira. In case you are wondering how to do testing in Jira, you can definitely customize Jira to do some kind of lightweight testing. You can create an issue type and you can basically have some workflows that can match your testing process. For example, you can have an issue type like test case, and you can have a workflow like to do, in progress, pass, fail, reject, and so on. And it is definitely quite easy to customize Jira, which is fine. But when you talk about doing some industry standard testing using a tool that can also be integrated with other applications, then you need some kind of an add-on. And in this video, I will be using a test management for Jira, which is an app or an add-on from Adaptivist. And using this add-on, you can bring in the testing capabilities within your project. So let us start using it. And in this video, we will simply install it and we will do some initial configurations. So before I start installing it, I will probably do a very quick overview of the marketplace product listing. And if you look at this marketplace listing, it of course talks about what this add-on can do. The thing that is really important is that this particular app, Test Management for Jira, is available on server, cloud, and also data center, which is always a good thing. And if you look at the listing or the product page, you can see here that the page talks about that test management for Jira is capable of doing behavior driven development. You can also integrate it with other tools, and we will of course come to know about these features when we get more into the details. But I want to quickly install this and then do some initial configurations. So for the sake of saving time, I have already installed this app, and installing this app is actually not very complicated. You just need to go to the app or the manage add-on section in your Jira instance. If you're talking about, let us say, installing the app, you just need to type in the name of the app, which is TM4J or Test Management for Jira, and you can search for the app that will be available in your instance. If you have access to the internet, you can install it directly from Find New App section, but you can also download the jar of the app and you can install it by going to this upload app section. So I've already done the installation. Installation takes just few minutes, and you need to have some evaluation license or maybe the actual license if you have decided to purchase it. But the moment you install the app, you can see here that we have this listing here called Test Management for Jira, and you can of course make sure that the license is valid. Right now I'm using the evaluation version of Test Management for Jira. Now, right after installing the app, you will notice few changes. The first thing that you will probably notice is this new tab called Test Management for Jira in your Jira instance. So this is one thing, and the second thing is that you will also get this menu item on top called Test. Apart from these two options, you can also see the option to enable test management when you go to a specific project. So let us first click on the test management for Jira, and let us see what all we can do. So right now we have just started using test management for Jira, and the very first thing that you may want to do is enable it for a specific project. So let us say if I want to enable test management for Jira for one of my project called Android, I can select it and then I can make sure that it is of course enabled, or I can simply select this option here called on. So when I click on this toggle button, it will be enabled for me, and I can then filter it based on all the enabled projects where test management for Jira is enabled. So basically you need to make sure that you click on this this toggle button here. So maybe I also want to enable it for let us say my iOS project. So I'll click on it. So this is now enabled and we can start using it. But there is also some possibility of restricting the test management for Jira. So we will not talk about the permissions and restriction of test management for Jira in this video. I just want to quickly start using it. And for doing that, I have just enabled it. Now I want to go to the project. I can go to either Android development project or the iOS project, and then I can start maybe creating some test cases. So the moment I open the project, if I expand my sidebar, I will probably go to my project settings, and let us see if we have any option to use test management for Jira. So if I go to project settings, I can see that I have one option here called test management for Jira. I can click on it, and it should basically let me enable or disable the the add-on. But you can also do some other things here. For example, it says here that on top under issue types, enable disable test management for Jira for the issue types listed below. So right now we have a few issue types, and we also have the option to enable it for a specific issue type, which is always a good thing. Right now it is enabled for all the issue types. We also have the option called traceability sections, where it says that hide traceability section from the issue view page where no links exist on the following. So basically, when you talk about test management, you have your, let us say, epics, your stories, your bugs, and they are linked to each other. And you also want to link it to a, let us say, test case. And when you have these links present, you want the ability to trace the original requirement. So when you're doing testing, if there is a bug which is found, maybe you want to trace back to the original requirement. So there is an option to take a look at the traceability, which you can also hide if you want. Now we have the settings configured here, which is simply nothing but a toggle. Now I want to just start using it. And before I do that, I just want to also take a look at the test menu option on top. Then we will go to the project and we will see how we can use the test management for Jira. So when you look at the test menu on top, it will basically let you create some folders and some test cases. And you can, of course, just use this folder or the library where you can organize your test case maybe in a different way, so that you can also reuse it if you need to. So first thing that I will probably do is I'll probably create a folder. And right now I am working under my Android development project. And if you remember, I was I also enabled the test management for Jira for iOS project. So you have all the projects enabled where you can use the test management for Jira. So let us just work on Android development project. And if I click on a folder, create a folder, I can create a folder. Let us say if we are building, let us say a mobile app, I want to do testing related to the UI, maybe the APIs and the backend and so on. So I'll probably type in my folder name like UI. I'll create maybe one more folder, which is, let us say, API. And I have two folders in my library. So I can maybe create a new test case. So I can click on this link. And I also have some options here like create test cases in bulk, import from other projects, import from a file. And if I click on create a new test case, I can then type in my test case name, and I can now, of course, enter the details. So let us do a few things very quickly. Let me just create a test case where I am, let us say, trying to test my login functionality. So I'll just type in my test case name, and I'm using this particular section here where it is something similar to your create issue screen. So I want to enter my name, maybe the objective, which is always good. Maybe I want to make sure that login works perfectly. So these are, some of the things that you can use, like objectives. Precondition is very important concept where you want to make sure that this precondition is there or true. Now you can also move it to a specific folder. Let us say you want to move it to UI or API, Right now we are working on a simple login functionality, and let us say if this is to do with checking the validations. So maybe I want to add something like login functionality validations, where let us say if the username is blank or password is blank, I want to throw an error immediately. Now I can have some kind of a status, some other fields like priority, component, owner, and estimated time. So we can create a test case very quickly here, but we also have some other options like test script, where you can define step-by-step details, like for example click on the submit button and I can have some test data like username is blank and password not blank, which is of course something that you can provide. An expected result should be that validation error for username. So I'm just filling in the details, and I can of course do it for my test case, where I'm trying to create a test case for login functionality validation. And my second step could be that let us say if there are no blanks in the username, these things can be easily done by using, let us say, some JavaScripting, or it really depends what kind of applications you're trying to develop. But I'm just trying to create some steps here. So if this is basically the step. So the step is again click on the submit button, and again username not blank but with spaces, password not blank, and expected result should be a validation error for username. Now if I click on the save button, I can of course make sure that I am now able to execute it, but you also have some other tabs. So for example, if you look at the execution tab, it will tell you the executions. You also have the option to take a look at the traceability. Now traceability is something that will help you in tracing this test, which might be related to a story or maybe a bug or any issue that you have in your project. So I can link it to a specific issue in my project, or I can also search for some existing issues. So I can actually create a new issue here. It is always good to create a new issue directly, but you should always be able to, in this case, link it to a project, or not a project, but a specific issue or a story. So if I probably type in something here, I can select maybe a couple of stories here, and I can link it. Now I have the option to also link it to a conference page or maybe a web link, which is always good. I can also attach some files. Let us say I want to give some screenshots or maybe some files. It is always handy, and it works quite similar to your issues in Jira. You can also add a comment, and there is also a history. Now, one thing which I wanted to talk about is the concept of the version. For example, when you're creating these test cases, you have the option to also make sure that the version is also defined and saved for you. So you may have maybe a slightly different version of the same test case. Now you can see here that we have one test case and it says login functionality validation. And if you probably go back, I just want to see how it looks like on the project. And if I probably go back to my my project, I just want to see if I'm able to see something over there as well. Now I'll probably open one of my issue. Let us say if I open, I'll probably collapse my sidebar, and I'll take a look at one of my issue, which is listed here. We have the option to actually link it to a test case, or I can create a test case that is actually related to this particular issue. So right now I'll probably do the same thing. I'll create a test case, but I will do it from my project. So I'll probably open one of my issue, which is, let us say, Android-38, and I have the option to create a new test case. I'll do that very quickly, and it will probably take me to the same screen where I can create a test case just like we did earlier. Now, let us say this time I am testing my API testing or some validation. I can do it very quickly, but I'll just add my step 1, my test data, and my result. I'll just save everything, and I'll go back to my original issue. And the moment you do it, you can actually see here that we now have one link that will actually take us to the original test case that is of course in the library. Now if I go back to my original page where I'm just focused on my test cases, I can just take a look at all the test cases here, and I can now see here that I should have 2 test cases if I do a filter based on all test cases. So I have 2 test cases. I can probably open them again, or I can probably make a change to them. Right now it says it's in draft state. I'll probably do something else with it. I'll click on the login functionality. I will change the status to maybe approved, and I'll save it. So if you do the approval, or it is nothing but a status, some kind of a status. So maybe you want to make sure that your test cases are in the right status, so that someone who is working on it can figure out easily whether this test case is applicable or not. So we can go back to the library, and the one thing which I really like is that I have the breadcrumb on top, so I can navigate very quickly. And not only I'm focused on my test cases, but there are links that will take me back to the original issue. So if I go back to the issue, which is nothing but in this case my story, I may want to just do the execution. So if I, let us say, take a look at my traceability, right now I can see here that there is this small icon that looks like a play button. If I click on it, I should be able to start my execution. So right now, when you do the execution, you may want to do it for a specific environment. For example, if you're testing, let us say, you're trying to test something for the web, you are trying to build a login functionality. Maybe you want this login functionality to be tested on Chrome or maybe Firefox, and this environment is something that will really help you. Now, before I actually execute this, I may want to create the environments. So I will probably open one of my test case, and let us see if we can create the environment easily from here. So I'll probably take a look at my test script. I'll take a look at my execution, traceability, and I don't really have any option here to create the environment, but I believe we can do that if we go to the option here on top, like the configuration option. So let me show it to you very quickly again. So let us say if you're working on the test library, you can see here that we have the configuration option. If you click on it, you can now create some environments. Let us say you have the option to create something like Chrome, maybe Firefox, and maybe Internet Explorer. People use IE still, which is fine. So when we have few environments, we can now go back to the original issue. But since we are on this configuration page, we have the option to take a look at the other aspects, which we will worry about in a different video. But you have some control over those fields that appear, like the status or the environment, the priority. But if you switch the project, let us say if you are working on Android development project, but if you switch it to iOS, these things are now different. Now we have a separate list of things that you can configure for a different project, which is always good. So I'll go back to the Android. I'll go back to the test, and we also have the concept of plan and cycle, which we will worry about later on. But I just want to do a quick execution. So I'm back to my original issue, and if I click on my play button or the button to execute, the start the execution, I can now select the browser, and we also have the option to do this execution for a particular version of a test case, which is, in my opinion, really great, because when you have versions, you can have better control or more options when you're trying to do something. Let us say you're trying to test something, but for a slightly different thing. So you have the versions and use it if you need to. So when you start the execution, I guess it will take us to the place where we will be presented with the steps. Now we have a different view here. We have the option to take a look at the test here on top, test case on top, and we have the option to also take a look at the some of the other fields. It looks quite similar to your Jira issue, like where we have the environment, where we have iteration. We are not using iteration right now. We also have the option to use the planned start, actual start date, and these things really help when you're trying to do some reporting. And we have the option to take a look at the objective and precondition. If you remember from the issue that we created, we had these filled in. But the thing that I'm interested in is the test script. Now, test script is something that the tester will use to follow these steps, step by step, of course, and we can either pass or fail. I think so. So if you look at the test script number 1, right now we just have test script, which is giving us some instructions, like enter your username, enter your password, which is in the in a different test case. I'll probably go back there and I'll show you how it looks like when you have more than one steps to do. So if you click on this button, or this play, or not play, but it's a tick mark. If you click on it, you can see here that it says pass. So we now have only one step, and it says pass. It means that the overall status of the issue, or not an issue, but the test case is now pass. So it is fine if you go back to the original. Let us say if you go back to the test cases, the list of test cases, you can see here that there is some indication about the last test execution which actually passed. And if I click on it, I may be able to go back to the issue. If I go to the traceability, I'll take a look at my issue. I'll open it, and I'm doing it without opening a new tab because I want to show how easily we can navigate from the story to the test to the test execution. And if you look at the traceability section here, you can see here that the details of the execution will be displayed. Now, right now we just did one execution and it was passing, so it looks good. And there is a sign here, this green color that shows you that the last execution was not a failure, which is always good. But ideally, or in real world scenario, it will not always happen. So let us go back to the login functionality validation, the test case that we created earlier. This test case has a couple of steps, like step 1, doing something, step 2, doing something. And for this particular test case to pass, both the test cases should pass. But what we'll do, we'll execute it once, and we'll make sure that we pass one of these steps, but not the other one. So if I go back to the traceability, and I'll probably go to one of my story. I'll open it in a different tab just to save time. So I'm looking at the story which is now linked to the test case. I will probably start the execution from here, and this time I'll do it for Chrome. I'll click on the start button. So it is not really difficult because when you are starting the execution, you just need to assign the story to someone, and maybe you can use a subtask, or maybe you can have some indication on your issue so that the person who is supposed to do this testing will get notified, or maybe they have this view of all the test cases assigned to them. We also have the option to assign the test case, which is always good, to a specific person who will be doing the testing. Now, right now we are doing this execution on, let us say, Chrome, and we have two test steps here. I'll probably pass the first one, which is passing, and the overall status is now in progress. We also have the option to enable the timer. So while I'm doing a testing, I can see here that there is a time which will be helpful for reporting, and the clock is running. So I have to, let us say, execute my second step. So this time I will just fail it. So we have two steps. One is passing, the other one is failing, and the overall status is fail, which makes sense because we want to make sure that all the test cases and all the steps under it are passing. Only then we can be sure that the story was free from any bug. Now, if I, let us say, want to go back to the original issue, I'll just click on the Android 30, which is the story. And if I take a look at the traceability here, let us see the status. So we can see here that the last execution failed, and it is fine. It can happen. There is nothing to be disappointed about, but we have the option to execute it again. And this time I will execute it for Chrome. So usually this will happen when you fix a bug. So let us say the developer has fixed the bug, and now the developer is asking you to do one more execution. So you can just click on the button, the small play sign. And this time we will probably pass both of them. And we can now go back to the original issue. So I'll probably click on the back on top, the link that says back. It is always good to have the navigation. When you're working with any tool, how easily you can navigate from one screen to another screen is always great. And this time I can see that I have a traceability section showing me that the test case execution was pass. And this time I can probably change the status of my story to maybe done, or maybe you want to do it for Chrome, then Firefox, or maybe Safari, and so on. So we will make more videos on test management for Jira, and I really like working on test management for Jira because although you can do lightweight test management testing using Jira customizations, you can create your issue types like test campaign, test, and so on, but you still need some standard way for doing testing, and test management for Jira really brings in all those standard features by just installing an add-on. And there are some other advantages of TM4J. TM4J is another name for test management for Jira, and with the help of TM4J, you can also do some integration of your testing to other tools, which we will cover. I promise we will make more videos on this topic, but in this video, I just wanted to do a quick introduction, and also I wanted to show you how we can start using it immediately after installing it. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new today. Thank you very much.